Had I had a better education than I have, I wouldn't be sitting here today on a welfare check, disabled, at 43 years old, trying to raise 7 kids on $254 a month. You damn better believe that's why I'm fighting for my kids to have a good education.
West Virginia, oh my home. West Virginia's where I belong. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to those hills, the place that I call home.
1968, I was employed by the Board of Education in Lincoln County at Hamlin Elementary School. I was very shocked when I first went into the school. Dogs came in the building, flies were everywhere. The principal didn't arrive at school early. The teachers came in. They were lucky to be there by the time the bell rang to start school. When I became principal, there were students in the 6th grade who were still reading in pre-primers when we sent them to junior high school in the 7th grade. And I got to checking grade books, and they didn't keep grades. They didn't grade papers. They had tossed the papers in the trash can at the end of the day, hadn't bothered to keep grades. They had no grades in the grade book, and they said that they knew what the child would do because most of the time they had an older brother or sister, and they knew what kind of student they were. So I started checking grades. I told them they had to check the students' work, they had to give them grades, and if a child improved, the grade would improve. We stopped the ability grouping because we felt that children learn from each other, and that by segregating them and calling them high groups and low groups, they were at a social disadvantage too, because the students who were in the high group or the top group felt superior to those who were in the low group. We tried different approaches, not just using a textbook, but the children use writing experience stories and learning to read using their own language and own experiences. The teachers continued to take college classes. Marshall offered classes at our school during the evening hours, and we felt like that we were making quite a bit of progress.
In 1981, when Betty Jones had her hearing before the Board of Education, I was a reporter for the Charleston Gazette. And as you look through the courtroom, there's like an aisle down the middle, and on one side of the courtroom were people who were, as I later learned, opposed to Mrs. Jones, people who wanted her removed as principal of the school. And these people were all real well-dressed, women with their hair looked like they'd just been to the beauty parlor, people who were obviously well-to-do. The other side of the courtroom's people in flannel shirts and jeans, people with mud on their shoes, and it looked like they had come from way up in the hollows, and they turned out to be the supporters of Mrs. Jones. And there weren't any neutral people there.
I was charged with misappropriation of funds, of using supplementary textbooks, of not implementing the county reading program, not having a friendly atmosphere in the school.
They brought witness after witness up and testified, and nobody was really accusing this woman of doing anything except running a good school.
Parents from up the hollows came out to speak for Betty and said, my children have never learned to read before. They've learned to read since she's been principal. They're treated equally. They get to enter the spelling bees. They get to take part like all the other kids do. So it was just, it was a political thing. The people with influence went after Betty because she didn't allow their children to have everything. And they won.
The school board found me guilty of the things I was charged with, and they transferred and demoted me, and they sent me to a school on the other side of the county.
I covered that case, and I kept covering other issues that developed as a result of that in Lincoln County for the newspaper, and just got real interested in everything seemed to go back to the education issues and the control of the whole education establishment by politicians.
There was a time when it was election time, a member of the staff from the board's office visited the schools, and you were asked to contribute 10-20% of your salary as a donation to get the right board member elected.
You take a family that lives in Lincoln County, and they're part of that 41% that's on some form of public assistance. They get a chance for a school job. A guy gets a chance to drive a school bus. He gets the job, and what does that mean to him? That means that his uncle better vote right. If he happens to live up a holler, he better get the whole holler to vote right. Because if he doesn't do it, they'll hire somebody else who has a bigger family or a bigger holler and give him the school job. And it affects his child too, because if his child has a problem at the school, he better not complain. I mean, when a family is put in a position where to stand up for themselves means they're not going to eat, it's pretty damn difficult to stand up for yourself. The Board of Education in Lincoln County is the largest employer. On election day, what you see are school personnel, teachers, janitors, cooks. That's who's working the polls.
Education in Lincoln County was more about politics than about children, and I wanted to get involved more with that. Looking at the school system to see what was happening in the aftermath of the REC decision.
I can't remember why I left so free, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to see.
My grandfather had been active in organizing the UMW in West Virginia, in southern West Virginia. And so I was always very aware of how working people had to organize to have any impact on their lives. And so I began to look at school issues in that way. In my PTA, I guess at that moment it began, I just said, I'm sick of selling hot dogs. I'm sick of selling hot dogs for a few $100s when they're spending millions. And I think it's time we begin to look at how they're spending those millions. A parent named Janet Pauley had brought a case because her youngsters were attending a school where the sewer was running across their play yard, saying basically, treat our children fairly. Let them have a school that's as good as the county seat school. It took 7 years to come to the end of that case where a judge made a decision.
The West Virginia schools simply did not conform to a high-quality system of education.
He found that West Virginia schools were unconstitutional.
And what he discovered, to no one's great surprise, I guess, was that the large corporations that own most of the land and the absentee owners that own most of the land are not paying a fair share of taxes, and therefore the schools don't have adequate resources and therefore are unable to provide the kind of quality education the Constitution demands. And what he said to the legislature was that he was calling for, quote, nothing less than a complete reconstruction of the entire system of education.
I chaired the committee of 99. Others called it 95 because there were the bureau chiefs within the department were included in the committee and operated the subcommittees, and the total number was 99. But I chaired that committee, and through their help and the committee's help, we developed the master plan.
Once the REC decision was turned over to the State Department of Education, I knew we were in serious trouble because they had been the people who had allowed the school system to get in the position it was in. And so then when I was a parent named to the committee, I was able to read the working papers, and it became very clear that their priority once again was to give people new school buildings and say, see, we gave you something and now you have quality. Are you telling me that the master plan does not say to local school systems they need to consolidate?
Yes, ma'am. I'm saying that they do not have to consolidate. I don't know why counties A, B, and C have chosen to take the easy route. They're using us to some extent to justify what they want to do.
What started out as a parent's effort to improve the school system turned into a political haymaker for the politicians that have always run our schools.
Once they take the kids out of the community, then there's no control there by the local folks. And of course, it's a whole lot easier to administer one school than it is to administer a whole bunch. You don't have to scatter the money out here, there, and everywhere. There's a whole lot more money that we can concentrate over here. And I think that's the bottom line, really. It's not what happens to the kids. It's what happens to the money.
Next year, you all may have to go to Woodville to school. What do you all think about that?
I don't want to.
I don't like it.
All my friends and stuff are here, and it's fun. And some of my friends that are 5th grade might fail, and then I won't get to see them.
When I was in 7th grade, and they said, okay, you all are going to go down to the new junior high. I said, oh no. I said, I'm not ready for that. By the time you're in the 11th grade, like I am. You're just already in your category. And you used to have dreams about doing this and that, but they're all gone now. And now, do you want to explain to me why?
Kids are taken out of community. They are taken out of a supportive and secure situation and fragmented to the point where they don't have a sense of who they are. I think that's really the sad part of consolidation.
Well, it's a long way. Like if in the wintertime, some of them can't get over because of the hill, and if it's dangerous down there. I'm in ninth grade. If my grades are good, when I get 16, I'll keep on going. I like it.
This is one of the areas in the county where we have the highest dropout rate. In the class my son graduated with, there were 43 youngsters who began high school from here. 4 of those youngsters graduated. Down in the bottom, you're seeing a trailer, and that's where special education children are placed. It's common practice.
There were no suitable classes for Bonnie in Lincoln County. In order for her to have any schooling whatsoever, they sent her across a treacherous mountain to Furlsburg Grade School, where she was placed in a trailer with 15 boys. She was the only girl in the class. The majority of the boys who were in her class were not EMR boys. They probably had never even been tested. But they were boys who had become such behavior problems in the classroom they couldn't be controlled there, so they were sent to the trailer. They were under the supervision of a teacher, a rather elderly teacher, who had been removed from the regular classroom situation because she couldn't control her kids. Bonnie has always been a pretty shy kid anyway, and her being placed in that situation was probably the most traumatic part of her life. She was petrified of the boys. She was getting nothing out of this classroom situation. She was spending over an hour each way on a bus. Bonnie's personality went through such a radical change in that period of time that I was almost relieved when they told me when we moved to this end of the county that there was no classroom space for her and they'd have to put her on a waiting list. I mean, if Dina, with all of her sense of self, if she's up against the kind of thing that she is, Bonnie had no chance whatsoever.
I was very enthusiastic about what I was doing, partly because I was a new teacher, but mostly because I really believe in what vocational agriculture can do in a community. When I started teaching, I remember I had this boy, and we raised some cabbage together, and that was his project, a half-acre cabbage and an acre of beans. And his father he thought that we were crazy. He thought that we were foolish. And we picked those beans and took them up to the Charleston Farmers Market, and he got $13 a bushel from them. And his father didn't think that anymore. His father was raising beans the next year. And the thing about it is that boy, though, that was the first successful thing, maybe, that he'd ever done, that worked. And, that was worth a lot more than $13 a bushel. So to me, that's what is lacking for the kids here. That's what they're not getting. The vocational school got a lot of money, but I didn't get any of it. And then the money that we raised, they wouldn't let us have that. They used those shops over there to make dog houses and storage sheds to use in their homes, So the kids are, and they say, well, the kids are getting experience of working with wood, but, they're getting experience of making, the superintendent of a doghouse.
Your kids have been shut off. If they're poor, they don't fit. If they've got a handicap of some kind, they don't fit. I tell you, parents had better wake up to what's going on in the schools. I did.
Well, I paid the price for believing, and this life I have is not one I thought I'd find.
Too long in this state, as in lots of other states and rural communities, the politicians and the bureaucrats and folks sitting in this kind of building have said that a second-rate education is good enough for rural folks, that a second-rate education is good enough for poor folks, that a second-rate education is good enough for handicapped kids or for girls or for minority kids. And Judge Recht was right in saying that that's not true. That every child, no matter where they are or what they're about or what kind of family they come from, deserves and has a right to a first-rate education. But then something happened, because what we're now seeing is that all the talk, all this correct analysis has led to the State Department doing exactly what the State Department has been doing for years before there was ever a Recht decision. And that's trying to close down small rural schools and bring about consolidation, to try and take away control from local communities and put it in the hands, even more firmly, of politicians and bureaucrats, into their own hands.
On March 11, 1985, our school board voted to consolidate our high school under the agenda heading of implementation of state board policies of curriculum, educational quality, and attainment. By April 1st, they had every teacher in the county on the transfer list and had sent 2 teachers letters of intent to terminate their positions.
One of the reasons they give for wanting to consolidate our school is a shortage of funds. At the same time, they have $4 million in surplus funds in the Marion County banks.
My mother and my grandmother, and I'm sure yours too, have baked cakes, have held spaghetti dinners, have conducted carnivals, have done car washes, and you know what? We've raised that money over the years so that teachers and children have some supplies in their classrooms. And now, when the big decisions come about, they say, we don't need you anymore. We're going to close down your school and we're going to bus your kids someplace else. They have set the priority for the new money that's going to come in this state in 1987 for education. They have set the priority on buildings. We want the priority on people.
It's not enough to save the school building. What we have to worry about is improving the quality of what happens inside that school building all over this state and all over the country.
I just came down to get a snack and saw the rally, and I thought I would come up and take a look at it.
Is there any talk about the Recht decision?
Any talk about
department?
it? We had a meeting, 3-day meeting this week, and talking about what's been done, what is going on, and what the plans are.
What's the basic stand of the department on parents' involvement in education?
We believe in it.
We have a problem, I think, in thinking that if it was good enough for me, then it must be good enough for my child. And I don't think that's exactly true today. Just because I went to school the first 5 years in a wooden building with oil floors and potbelly stoves is no reason to think that that would be good enough for my child today.
I have a child that came out of the 12th grade right over, I'll not name the school, but right here in Lincoln County, that couldn't fill out a job application satisfactory. And very, very poor reader, very poor reader. I only got an 8th grade education when I went to school, and I'm not bragging or boasting about it, but I'm a far better reader right today than some of my children that's came out of high school. And we have people in authority here in Lincoln County that say that they're proud of our achievement test scores from time to time, and yet we continue to rank way down, maybe not on the bottom, but way down compared to the other counties in West Virginia. And I'm certainly not satisfied with it. And I'm not going to be satisfied with it until our children in Lincoln County have the same opportunities in the job market as children in the more metropolitan counties. I think people probably in authority will deny this, but most definitely politics are involved. Politics and the tax system go hand in hand, and I think everybody in the county knows that, but it's not talked about too much. We're a mineral-rich county, and there was 12, 14 years that mineral taxes was not raised one bit in this county until a bunch of concerned citizens taken it upon themselves to look into the matter and put pressure on people to change that. And it has been changed somewhat.
We had been active in bringing about an increase in mineral taxes in Lincoln County. And which was going to increase by over $500,000 the amount of money that the Board of Education was going to get. And so we had a sneaking suspicion that they weren't going to spend it right. They went to some budget meetings and found out that the $500,000 had just disappeared into the budget.
The people in our county, they do not want to be like somebody else. They don't want, the people in this county are basically happy.
The superintendent's brother-in-law, the transportation director, had gotten a $2,000 raise in salary, and the teachers had gotten nothing, and I pointed that out, and they didn't like that at all.
We looked at the Title I program, which has now become Chapter 1 under Reagan, and Lincoln County had received $800,000 in 1 year for that program, and they had misspent $720,000 of that money.
Those things are their frustrations. Those things have no base. That's because they didn't get what they wanted, and they use that as a thrashing thing. I think they want another form of government. I'm not sure that they believe in good old American democracy.
After one of those meetings, brother-in-law of a board member called me a communist and asked me if I wanted to go out back and fight. And then a few minutes later, the superintendent came out of the building and says, "Where are they?" And he put his fists up. He says, "The meeting's over. I'll take them on. I'm not afraid," or something like that. He looked kind of ridiculous. I turned to look at him, and when I turned to look at him, the lights went out. His brother-in-law had jumped off the curb and hit me in the side of the head and knocked me up against a brick wall.
Well, I think that it ought to be handled at the lowest possible level. If a teacher is doing something wrong, and sometimes that happens, then the teacher ought to have a chance to correct it. If the principal isn't providing what needs to be provided, the principal ought to have a chance to correct it. And if the superintendent and the board aren't doing things as they should be doing, that superintendent and the board ought to have an opportunity to correct it before it goes any further and resolve it at the local level.
Quite often they'll say, let the people at the local level handle this. Let's have, they like to dress that up as being democratic. But at the local level, it's not democratic. The people who control the schools at the local level are the politicians who buy votes. It's a job system. It's a patronage system. It's not an educational system. It's a system whereby the politicians can hold some jobs for the people that help them get elected.
We're not starting from scratch here. I mean, I can tell you, if we were inventing a new community that had no history, what it is that would help create a good rural school. But I think that we have to go back in a county like this to the sort of first rule of being a physician. Which is, the first thing that physicians are taught is, above all else, do no harm. And I think the first thing that has to happen in counties like this is to stop the harm in order to have the resources and to have the power to make good changes.
I mean, I teach because I like it, and because was raised not to be too greedy, I guess, and so I'm not greedy for a whole lot of money, and so I make enough money to live on. My dad, fought his way out of the coal mines so that we could go to college, and now here I am. He got me educated, and I can't send my own kids to college on my salary, and that's ridiculous. When the working men got their kids out of the trap so that they could escape, dangerous jobs, and now we can't help our kids escape dangerous jobs. So it's how do you get good teachers? When you got 30 kids in the class, it's really difficult. So one of the main changes, I think, to improve education is you got to cut the classes down to about 15 people. Once you do that, then you've got a very easy personal contact with the kids, and you don't have very many discipline problems. You don't have a situation that can get out of control. I mean, I've seen classes go clear out of control because there's just too many people in there. It's the only situation I know of in American society where they put that many people in that small space. I mean, I don't know any other place that they do that. The military and the prisons and the school systems.
One of the problems that we've seen is that there's essentially a mistrust of parents and a mistrust of the democratic process. And so professionals believe that unless control is in their hands and politicians' hands, that all these terrible things are going to happen. And there's a tendency to cite cases like parents burning books and such as an example of this is what's going to happen if parents are allowed greater control over the schools. That I think some of the extreme kinds of actions which parents have taken are precisely the result of the extent to which they've been frozen out. In other words, when people are excluded from the normal, ordinary process of decision-making, by acting in a dramatic way, they have their only access and their only influence, and is not indicative of what they would do were they a normal part of the decision-making process. There's going to be a rejuvenation of rural education. It's not going to be because somebody comes up with a master plan for all the schools in the state or all the schools in the country. It's going to come because parents and teachers begin working together in local communities to really figure out what best will work with those kids in that community at that point in history. I remember seeing a picture of a little boy carrying a sign here in West Virginia, and the sign said simply, "I'm what this is all about." And that made sense to me. That's true. That's what this is all about.
Somebody has got to stand up and fight these people and say, you know, we can have a good school. The schools can be to educate children, not just for political hacks to control jobs and to control the people's lives that live here. Everybody's got a right to an education. Every child's got a right to an education. No matter how far up the holler he lives, he's got a right to learn to read and write, to learn to think on his own, and to do things, to know that he can do anything he wants to do, that he doesn't have to stay up that holler, that he doesn't have to vote for who they tell him to vote for, that he can read, he can find out the issues and the facts, and he can vote his mind, his will, his opinion.
Why do I fight for a better education? I want my children to have far better education than I have, because that's the one thing that the bureaucracy can't take away from them. They can take a shirt off their back and their shoes off their feet, but they can't take it once they get it up here. They can't take it.
Well, let me live, love, let me cry when I go. Just let me die among the friends who remember when I'm gone. West Virginia, oh, my home. West Virginia's where I belong. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to those hills, the place that I call home. Home, home, home. Oh, I can see it so clear in my mind. Home, home, home. I can almost smell the honeysuckle vine. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to the